Total wine.
30 seconds.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and it's like right in the.
All right, good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Village of Cary and the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals, I'd like to hereby call this meeting to order on June the 13th, 2019 at approximately 7:30 p.m. We have a quorum of members, and at this time, I'd like to ask our Director of Community Development, Mr. Simmons, to please call the roll.
Williams?
Present.
Pippin? Here. Graziano? O'Laughlin?
Here.
Kretschmer?
Here.
Jasper?
Here.
Corey?
Here. Mr. Chiavelli, we invite you to stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. So, gentlemen, I know we were talking at the top of, before we went on camera here, that you have some meeting minutes from our last ZPA meeting. And I know that you received these electronically, but I want to double check that all of you have them in front of you now. And I want to see if anyone has any questions about the meeting minutes from our previous meeting dated May the 23rd. Okay, hearing none, the chair will entertain by a voice vote approval of the meeting minutes dated May the 23rd, 2019. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, gentlemen. So our first case, gentlemen, is for petitioner Spirit Water. And Mr. Chiavelli is here representing the owner. And the request is a conditional use for a brew pub and is a variation to reduce the number of required parking spaces from 47 to 28, and the location is 3300 Three Oaks Road. This is village case number ZPA 05001, and at this time I'll turn it over to Mr. Simmons for an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As mentioned, the request this evening is for a proposed business that will be located in the building located at 3300 Three Oaks Road. They're seeking a conditional use for a brew pub, which is a new use which is allowed in the B2 district under the new Unified Development Ordinance. Mr. Graziano is here.
Welcome, Mr. Graziano.
Sorry about that, gentlemen.
Oh.
No, we thought you might have been away with the grandkids, so
Working in the backyard.
I get it. All right, well, welcome.
And the additional request is also for a parking variance related to the proposed use. As mentioned, the subject property is zone B2, which is a shopping center business district. They're seeking approval this evening of the conditional use for the brew pub and apologies, a parking variation to 27 parking spaces. The agenda mentioned 28 spaces. The proposal is to convert the former retail space, which was occupied by Country Tile and Carpet, to a brew pub and distillery land use. A little bit of property overview. The building was first constructed back in 1987. At least the east half of the building was constructed, which is where the proposed facility would be located at. 1997, an addition was constructed on the building, which you can somewhat see in the two images where that dividing line is by the brick colors and also the roof colors, which added additional square footage of about 5,000 square feet to the building. You have two existing tenants that are in that structure, in RK Auto and Tire and Fiji Construction, which occupy the western half of the building. And the petitioner is proposing to occupy the entire eastern portion of the building where the Country Tile and Carpet and Marlene's Hair Salons used to be located at. This evening, under the B2 zoning district, brew pubs require conditional use approval. As indicated in the floor plan on the right-hand portion of the slide, a tap room would be located in the former showroom or retail space, which fronts onto Three Oaks Road. And then a brew house would be located in the warehouse portion of located in the rear of the building. As proposed, the property currently has 27 existing parking spaces. If you look at each individual use on its own, the in total parking that would be required for the site would be 47 spaces. The brew pub by itself, with the breakdown of both the tavern, our tap room area and the warehouse, would be required to provide 26 spaces by itself, while the other two uses with the auto repair and the contractor's office would be required to provide 21 spaces on their own. The petitioner is seeking a variance based off The proposed difference in hours of operations between the two uses, as you can see in Table 2 in the lower portion of the slide and also in your staff report, both RK Auto and Fiji Construction have normal operating hours of approximately 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekdays and similar hours on the weekends, while the proposed brewery would be closed on Mondays but would have more evening hours, opening to the public around 3 p.m. And then remaining open in the evening hours of 9 p.m. during the weekdays and 11 p.m. on weekends. With the minimal overlap between the proposed uses and also observations of the utilization of the parking lot at the end of each day, staff believes there's adequate parking to accommodate all the uses in the parking lot and would be supportive of the requested parking variation as a result. As with any proposed uses, the Unified Development Ordinance provides conditional use standards or standards that be required to be met for a conditional use to be supported by the village board. Specifically on this slide, they're summarized as far as the use will not impede normal orderly development of surrounding property, contribute to no overburdening of municipal services, and will be consistent with policies and future land use maps in the village's comprehensive plan. Likewise, the Unified Development Ordinance establishes standards for consideration of a variance, specifically that the property cannot yield a reasonable return if permitted to be used only under the standards set out in the title. Applicant not taking any action that has caused the extraordinary condition and made it substantially worse than otherwise might have been. And the relief proposed will not alter the character of the locality. As mentioned also in the staff report, the petitioner is intending to have conversations with the adjacent Aldi property for potentially entering into a shared parking agreement for overflow parking. So in evenings, if the parking lot cannot accommodate the amount of vehicles they may be having coming to the property, they're working with that property owner to potentially have a shared parking agreement for overflow parking as well. With that information in consideration, in case 19 ZPA 0501, staff is recommending that if the ZPA recommend approval of the following motion: approval of a conditional use for a brew pub parking variance to reduce the required parking spaces from 47 to 27 spaces for the property located at 3300 Three Oaks Road, subject to the conditions as listed in the staff report. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, and the petitioners here can provide additional information regarding their proposal as well.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Gentlemen, questions for Mr. Simmons?
Obviously, I don't. Obviously, I'm sure none of the neighbors have complained because there aren't any out there. But could you go back to the overview of the property, the aerial? So we only have one entrance in and one entrance out. Is that going to pose a problem to any fire rescue?
No, from a access standpoint, that would be adequate for providing access into the property. Also, with the location of the building closer to Three Oaks Road, they would have, if necessary, for.
Oh, I mean, they could sit on Three Oaks because it's right on Three Oaks. But I mean, yeah, okay.
Yeah, from an access standpoint, the property is existing. They would more than likely, responding to an issue, would pull into that first drive aisle immediately adjacent to the building on the eastern side. But if they need to respond to a larger issue, they could utilize both Three Oaks Road and the parking lot to service the property.
To service the, okay. All right, thank you.
Is it a concern if we're using the Aldi as a overflow that there's no sidewalk?
Yeah, there is.
Is there? Oh, right in the front there?
Yep.
Yeah,
So you walk around that way?
there's currently a sidewalk that terminates at the property line between the Aldi and the subject site. The village is actually, under our sidewalk gap program, have plans to install a portion of sidewalk that would connect to that existing walk to this driveway entrance. So there would be a connection that would be installed likely this summer to complete that gap.
Yeah, there's just
Other questions, gentlemen?
doesn't carry through.
They're running sewer and water to this property?
The property currently is on water service. It is on septic. And as part of the proposed operations, they would be disconnecting from that septic field and connecting to our village sewer.
And what's the timeline on that?
They're in for permits for that presently. So that would be completed as part of their remodeling for this project. It would be completed this summer.
Okay.
And the sewer line currently runs on the western property line that serves the Aldi. So they'd be tapping into a connection that was provided when that project was constructed.
And they mentioned that once the septic field is gone, there's additional paving that could be done for additional parking?
Correct.
How many spots would that?
Presently, that area, you can kind of see it in the overhead view here in the rear of the building where some of the auto users park. There's a gravel area that for cars that are being repaired, they do park in a gravel area to the north of the lot. It looks like in this area you can see about 5 vehicles that are parked in that location now. There would be potential to another handful of spaces you can get in that area for overflow parking as well. That's say 5 to 7 spaces if that area were to be paved. It wouldn't be significantly more than what there is on the property today.
And is that in addition to what they're using in gravel space now, or is that what you're saying is the
That'd be in addition to the 27 spaces that are
27
counted.
spaces? But
Correct.
did you include the gravel parking?
No, they're not official spaces.
So it's basically no change then?
No, if that area were to be paved, that would be additional parking above the 27 spaces that exist today.
But we're not really adding any parking. It's already being used for parking. We would just be officially adding parking.
Correct. So the number of spaces on the site would, if those were to be constructed, would go from 27 to 35, perhaps, whatever the number would actually be.
And how did you go about observing the current parking lot usage?
Driven past the site and didn't calculate exactly how many vehicles are in the parking lot, but during different periods of time with an example of the street view that was taken here was taken during the daytime hours. There are other times we traversed past the site with the 2 users that are in the property. The parking lot that's on the eastern half of the property is very limitedly used presently.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. Jasper?
Since I didn't have time to go, I'll wait
Okay.
for the petitioner.
Gentlemen, any questions?
So no food, right? This is just strictly beverage?
Correct. And the petitioner provide more information as far as how the business would operate, but there's no plans for them to provide food service.
Mr. Graziano, Mr. Pippin, questions?
No.
Not at this time. All right, so gentlemen, what we'll do now is that we'll shift gears. And Mr. Civelli, if you'd like to offer any additional comments.
Sure.
And for the process, please state your name and address for the record because it does get recorded. Thank you very much.
Hi, so my name is Jagdish Chevli, and over here is Tim Kovac, my partner
Nice to
in
meet
this endeavor. So essentially what we're trying to do is we have an operating brewery and distillery business in Wakanda, which we are moving over here. We have been operating there for about 7 years now, and we are rebranding from our existing name, which is Small Town Brewery, to Spirit Water. As you can see, I have a few slides. I'll quickly go through that, and then I'll answer any questions that you might have. So we established the business in about 2010, and the signature product of our brewery was Not Your Father's Root Beer, if you're familiar with it. We entered into a license agreement with Pabst in 2015 and took that brand national. And since that time, Pabst has been distributing root beer, Not Your Father's brand, root beer, all over the country. In the meantime, what we have done is we have acquired a distilling license and essentially expanded our portfolio to have a little bit more than beer. So we now have formulations for liquors, whiskeys, vodka, and bourbon. And I'll go to the next slide. So essentially, we have 16 one-of-a-kind beers on tap, and we have 9 liquor products that we are bringing into the portfolio by the second half of this year. More than half of these have already been approved by the TTB, and the rest of them are in the final phases of label approvals before we can start selling. The usage, I guess Brian already showed you what the tap room is going to look like. We expect to have about 2,400 square feet of the front showroom portion to be used for tap room space, and the rear 2,800 plus square feet that's available to relocate our group of equipment from Wakanda to here. In terms of what we are bringing into the community, essentially there's a capital investment of $1 million. We are acquiring the entire site, 3,300 from the current owner, and we will occupy Unit A for this operation. Brewing capacity is about 1,800 gallons per batch, and distilling capacity is about 120 gallons per batch. I am not sure exactly if this is enough information, or if you have any questions, I'm here, and so is Tim, to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chiavelli. Gentlemen, questions for the petitioner?
I have one.
Sure.
It's been in our packet, and Mr. Simmons mentioned that you're working on a possible agreement with Aldi for overflow parking. Where are you at in that process?
We have not started that conversation yet. That's basically put as a backup plan if we find out that we need more parking. If we have basically been monitoring how many parking spots we use in Wakanda right now, and on any given day, we don't use more than 15 parking spots over there. So even if after we move here, for the initial year or so, we don't anticipate the business to be growing to a phenomenal space. But if it does, then we'll basically negotiate with the plan is to negotiate with Aldi to share the space.
Okay, so your plan is to wait and see, and then talk to Aldi only if it's necessary?
That's correct.
Nothing proactive or?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Pippin. Gentlemen, other questions for the petitioner?
Okay. Could you repeat, please? You said in Wakanda you currently have how many parking spaces, and you using on?
We on average we use on Saturday evening is our busiest night, and on those days we get about 50 to 60 people in the tap room. And that translates to about 15 to 16 parking spots being used in the existing location that we are at.
Okay. Deliveries, distribution, that kind of thing. I presume you're having 18-wheelers, tractor trailers pull into the site, or?
Not 18-wheelers, not that often. Most of our deliveries, basically, I mean, when we move the physical equipment, yes, there'll be 18-wheelers. But on a day-to-day basis, we don't have any large volumes that we move in or out. Most of what we make over there, essentially in Wakanda today, gets consumed.
But moving into this facility, you'll be.
Yes, so we will be distributing. It's essentially the 15-gallon kegs, and normally the agreement that we have right now basically allows us to have restaurant owners come and pick up their kegs. So at any given time, you might have one or two people picking up kegs as they need them. Mm-hmm. But we don't have a operation large enough to really support hundreds of kegs being shipped out every day.
Currently, or even at this level?
Even in the future, I think the focus going forward is going to be equally on distilling, which will be much less labor intensive and I guess raw material intensive.
And the delivery of your supplies is not coming in tractor trailers. They're coming in.
So it depends. I mean, depends on which how much we are ordering. So an occasional tote, which is 4 feet by 4 feet, I mean, they get delivered sometimes in 18-wheeler, sometimes in a small truck. There's no specific, depending on who the shipper is and how they're doing the last mile determines. But on a typical day, Tim, how many, in a month, you would say how many 18-wheelers we have coming? Probably zero.
Zero. If we're lucky, maybe one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that parking lot big enough for 18-wheeler to turn around and come back out?
Yeah, it has a drive-in door and a ramp because it used to operate a carpet business,
Okay.
which is like 12-foot rolls that are massive.
There currently, as you can see in the image here, there currently is an overhead door and a loading dock that's on the eastern side of the building that would serve this tenant space.
Other questions, gentlemen?
What's the current operation as far as food there? Do you just serve, do you have like catering or delivered food? Some of
Yeah, so we basically have two options that we currently utilize. One is we have a set of menus where people can order from the menu, and the Domino's or whoever it is will come and deliver whatever it is that you want to eat. And the second option that we are currently experimenting with is basically we have a small oven similar to a residential oven where we get some frozen pizzas, and if somebody wants it, then we serve that. At this point, we don't have any plan to have a kitchen per se at the facility.
Yeah, some things that I've seen is pairing up with some local, like you said, some local restaurants, obviously, to cater. You know, I don't know, there's Kojak, whatever local ones. I'm sure you could find that out.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we do that with many of the neighbors in Wakanda currently, where they will basically deliver, they leave their menus, and we just offer people as they come in the options of what's available.
Right. And then another big thing, and I don't know, just a random question about dogs. Would you permit dogs to come? I know lots of people, there's a dog park right around the corner.
We do, yeah. I mean, in our current facility also we have we don't have any issues people bringing in their dogs.
Okay. I don't know if there's ordinances, or I know that there's, okay.
There's no local ordinance, it's more of a health department
Okay.
issue.
Good. That's cool.
Gentlemen, additional questions for the petitioner? So, Mr. Simmons, I have, go ahead.
One
Mr.
more.
Williams.
I did hear a read about possible outdoor in the future.
Yes.
What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so in the summer of 2020, which is next summer, what we were thinking about is, if you look at this, I'm sure you can see.
Yeah.
Once this, I guess this is not a good view. So essentially, the public walkway will come from here and extend all the way up to here and connect to this. And what we were thinking of taking over was basically the space inside, which is about 11 feet by 60 feet, and convert that into an outdoor seating area. We already have a door over here that will allow customers to in and out, and we plan to use this side door that used to be the salon's door as our main entrance door into and out of the parking lot into the brewery and tap room. But that's something that we are contemplating. We don't have a plan yet, and we don't intend to make it available this year. This year, the focus is to just move here, settle here, and then think of expansion.
In my opinion, outdoor is something that's lacking in the areas, outdoor eating, and so, good idea.
Any other questions, gentlemen? So, Mr. Simmons, could we just slip back to the slide that showed the hours of operation? So, Mr. Chiavelli, I won't pretend to be an expert in your business, but it seems like there's some significant overlap on Saturday. And I think where Mr. Pippin may have been headed is that if there's no discussions going on today with additional parking, may I humbly suggest you start to give that some additional reflection, because on Saturday, when the other business is open and there's significant overlap, I think that may be hopefully a good thing, good problem to have on Saturday perhaps. And you may want to be looking in advance at that option. That would be a suggestion, but that's up to you to decide.
Okay, all right. We'll start some preliminary conversations and see where it goes.
Yeah, very good. Okay.
I would feel a lot more comfortable if you would consider that. Yeah, as Chairman Corey just said, that overlap on the weekends is a little bit concerning to me. So if you had a backup plan or a place where other people could park, and as he said, that would be a good thing if does become a need. So I would just like to second that thought and seriously ask you to consider beginning that process sooner rather than later. Have something ready to go in case you need it.
We'll put something in place, assuming that we can get some agreement with them, yes.
Mr. Simmons, is Three Oaks Road, that stretch of Three Oaks Road under the village's purview? Is that a village road?
Next to it's unincorporated.
I believe it is a village road in that location.
All right, do we know if it's already posted, no parking anytime?
Yes.
It is,
No parking,
okay.
yes.
All right. So that would be, it could become an issue for you then.
Okay. And once the connector is made available or is in place, then we can definitely use that space
Right.
without having to put any other burden on the green space that's around our area.
Mhm.
So gentlemen, any additional comments at this time for the petitioner? Mr. Graciano? No. Good. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chiavelli.
Thank you.
We're going to close that portion of the meeting, and part of the process is that we open it up for public comment. I recognize that there's the two of you assembled here. That is part of the process. So I don't believe either one of you want to comment as the public, so we will close that portion of the meeting. Gentlemen, before I call the motion, do you have any additional questions or comments that you'd like to add?
I do have one more. Was there any feedback from any of the people that were notified at all, the current tenants in the facility, or have you had conversations with the current tenants at all regarding?
Yeah, so the other two.
Could you, sorry.
So yes, so the other two tenants that are going to be part of the property that we own as a part of this acquisition have no other issue, have no issues, and then based on the recommendation or the list of neighbors that were provided by the village, I sent out letters to all of them about 3 weeks ago, and I have not received any feedback from anyone.
Okay. Did the village receive any feedback?
We did not,
at all? Okay. And then your plan is to let the tenants remain as long as they wish, or?
Yeah, so we basically have an agreement with them that will expire at the end of this year, but I have already told the current owner to extend it for 3 more years, so their business does not get disrupted as a result of us moving in. And at the end of 3 years, I mean, they're free to basically decide whatever they want.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, gentlemen? Okay. Hearing none, then the chair will entertain a motion to recommend to the Village Board of Trustees approval of a conditional use for a brew pub and parking variance to reduce the required parking spaces from 47 to 27 spaces for the property located at 3300 Three Oaks Road, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Any additional comments or questions on the motion? Mr. Williams?
When is the opening date? Or the proposed opening date?
So we are looking to wrap up everything by the end of July, so early August is what we are targeting.
For like doors open and? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I just
It's okay.
wanted to make sure I saw that right.
As you know, we've deviated the rules a few times around this place. So maybe another example.
We'll certainly get you
Yeah, all right.
Just shocked.
All right, so gentlemen, unless there's any other questions,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask, go ahead, Mr. Jasper.
While I think the parking is manageable, I am still concerned about it on a long-term basis. I would propose that we amend the motion to put a 2-year term or a 3-year term on the variance for parking so that it is revisited after this is more of a mature business. I think that there is space to meet the parking requirements within the property that's already there, but I don't think we need to require them to do that at this point in time. So if we put a term on the variance and have it revisited at a later date, we can decide whether we need to ask that the open areas be redesigned for the appropriate parking. And at that point in time, we'll know what the parking needs are. And if it's being met, then we just extend the ordinance or extend the variance. And if there are needs, we'll address them at that point in time.
Okay.
Can we put a timeline on the variance?
No, I was just trying to think that from a
I didn't think we could.
variance standpoint, I don't believe you can. If it's a conditional use, you can on the use. But from a variance standpoint, you're looking at the conditions of the property as they are today and determining whether or not the variance standards are met for the proposed use.
Yeah, I didn't think we could change that.
Yeah, I think I understand what Commissioner Jasper is mentioning. Condition 4 is to submit a copy of a shared parking agreement executed with the nearby property. I think there's potentially could reword that to require if after the opening of the business or the business is operating on the site, that should the village determine that a agreement is necessary, that would need to be executed and then submitted to the village. So you can have that trigger in there to say we would evaluate the site, and if that condition were to happen, require them to provide some sort of shared parking agreement with an adjacent property. It doesn't need to be specifically the Aldi property, but it could be another property.
Or even redesign. I mean, if you want to pull up
provide additional
the parking lot again,
Mm-hmm.
I think that you can, easily get another 15 parking spaces on there.
Sure. Yeah, it could be rewarded to either provide a shared parking agreement or provide additional parking on site to comply with code.
Yeah. But I just don't think we need to do it at this time.
Thank you.
What currently serves as detention for this property?
There's a area you can see just to the east of the parking lot. That portion right there serves as the detention for the site. So it's constructed prior to McHenry County's current stormwater ordinance.
Yeah, it's an old building, or
Right.
an older building.
Correct.
Right.
So that serves as detention for specifically this property. The larger Caper lots, which include the Aldi and the vacant lots across the street, there's a detention basin along Industrial Drive that those all drain towards.
Okay.
So, Mr. Jasper, I just want to be clear that you're withdrawing your request now for that amendment? Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
very good.
As long as we're changing that one condition, right?
Yeah, as long as we're changing,
Do we need to read?
Condition number 4.
Yeah. And as the motion, I'll agree with that change.
Okay, so, and I just want to double check with Mr. Jasper, are we now asking for a date on the parking agreement, or?
No.
No.
No,
We'll
stating that
leave it to the village and the property owner
to decide.
to determine whether, the village, from a public safety perspective, if there's parking issues, if it's overused, we have people attempting to park on 14 or on Three Oaks.
Or the railroad tracks.
Or the railroad tracks, yeah. But no, I would think it would be fine if we left it to the village.
Sure. I
To
understand.
make that determination.
I understand that. I think what I'd recommend is then if condition 4 would read that should a parking deficiency occur on site as evaluated by the village, the petitioner shall provide a shared parking agreement or additional spaces to accommodate any additional parking requirements for the property.
And as the motion, I agreed. Second, did you agree?
Yes.
Yes.
Does the petitioner agree?
Yes.
All right, gentlemen, before we call the vote, anything else? All right, Mr. Simmons, would you call the roll on the vote?
O'Loughlin,
Yes.
Kretschmer,
Yes.
Jasper,
Yes?
Williams,
Yes.
Pippin,
Yes.
Graziano,
Yes.
Corey.
Yes. So you have a favorable recommendation, and I think you may know, Mr. Chudley, that you stay in touch with Mr. Simmons. He'll bring this forward to the next village board meeting. Because you have a unanimous vote, I believe this gets put on the consent agenda, which means it doesn't necessarily take another vote, but I would stay in close contact with Mr. Simmons to make sure that the process, he'll give you the date of the next meeting. And we'll also wish you and Tim every success with the new business.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Welcome to the village.
Hope you have a parking problem.
Yeah.
I hope, yeah, definitely. I hope you have a parking problem.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Well, they're in walking distance from my house.
All right, gentlemen, before we conclude,
I'm driving.
Staggering or walking?
Either way. Walking there,
now, gentlemen, before we conclude, are there any other questions, comments that you may have? Mr. Simmons, do you have any information about the next meeting potentially?
We will have a meeting in 2 weeks. We have a signed variance that will come before this board for consideration under the UDO.
Okay, and that meeting will occur at what time?
7:30 PM.
Very good. Okay, any other?
28th,
The 27th.
27th?
Yeah.
Good. All right, the chair will entertain
So
a
moved.
second to adjourn. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.